Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Jack Daly, award winning, best selling author, retired US Naval Officer with 20 years of service to his country in various assignments. Welcome to the show, Jack.
Thank you, AJ. Pleasure to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Jack. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe, especially in the US, will benefit from what we are going to discuss right now. We'll talk about how healing can be achieved through laughter's power. And that is what you are using in terms of veterans' suicides, which is with the rate which is going very high at the moment. We'll all talk about all of this, Jack. But first, let's understand a bit about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are listening to.
Okay. As you said in the introduction, I'm a retired naval officer. I live in the United States, specifically just outside the town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Any of your history buffs will know what Gettysburg meant to the United States during the Civil War. It was a key battle. But grew up in Philadelphia, went to high school and ended up in college in Florida. Joined the Navy in 1983 as an enlisted sailor. My job title was I was a radioman or a communications tech. While I was on active duty, I finished my college degree, got my bachelor's, and applied for a commission through the Officer Candidate School program in the Navy, and was commissioned in 1989 as a surface warfare officer. Essentially a ship driver, but then I switched over to intelligence in 1991 and spent the remainder of my career in the intelligence field for the Navy.
Right. And now you are with an emergency management specialist within the Department of Defense, if I understand.
Yes, that is correct. Primarily what my responsibilities are continuity of operations and continuity of government and IT disaster recovery work. I currently am still working for the Department of Defense, but on November 15th, I'll be retiring for full time.
Right. But one thing I want to understand for the audience, Jack, is that you could be busy in everything that you were doing, and so why talk about veterans suicide? So many veterans suicide, active duty military suicide, military spouse and dependent suicides, PTSD, mental health, so many things you got, all things on your mind together. You could have just be very happy with what you had, and rather than not think about all these troubling things. Why did you do it?
You know, AJ, the numbers are actually very appalling to me, especially the veteran suicides. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I have a very good friend who has been on the precipice of dealing with PTSD after his experiences over in Iraq and elsewhere. And I thought, when I heard the numbers, my wife asked me, what's going on? I told her, I don't know. I don't understand it. I started doing a little research. And she asked me, she goes, well, what could you do about it? I really didn't know on the spur of the moment. And then she asked me, well, what got you through your darkest days? And I told her, laughing. I had to laugh at things. I had to laugh at some of the situations I found myself in. Otherwise, I would cry, and that would make matters worse for me physically than they already were. So when I say making matters worse for me, in 1997, I was on a mission off of Seattle, Washington. I was flying in a Canadian helicopter with a Canadian crew, and I was photographing a Russian spy ship that was operating within U.S. territorial waters. We didn't know it at the time, but we learned later that someone on the ship fired a laser at us. It burned both of my retinas. I have retinal scars that 28 years later, almost. I haven't had a pain-free minute since April of 1997, and it was laughter. So I figured, okay, what can I do with that? And I had been practicing a series of steps every morning called Savers. It was a book put out called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. It's a world famous book. And he has a set of steps that we do that I was doing every morning, and it really helped me cope with stresses and a bad boss at the time. And I thought, well, I'll do the same thing with the word laugh. I'll turn it into a mnemonic. So laugh out loud is a daily practice, 5 steps using the word laugh. So the first letter L is for laugh, find something to laugh about. The second letter A is act, go do something you've never done before, get up off the sofa, get your face out of the iPad. And then U is unplug, put the devices down, go out and look at the sky, take a deep breath of nice fresh air instead of having your head down in a device all day. And then G is for grow, learn something you always wanted to learn, but you never took the time. Take the time to learn. If you always wanted to do woodworking, take some classes, watch some YouTube videos. And then H is for humor. Humor me or humor somebody else. Make somebody else laugh, because that's the highest form of laughter, is to actually make someone else laugh along with you, or as a result of whatever you do to make them laugh. So I set that up as a daily practice. It can be done over an hour. It can be done over 5 minutes. But the thing is, do it. Practice it on a daily basis. And I wrote the book, Laugh Out Loud. Hopefully, my goal was for the book to be a coping mechanism for any of those veterans or anybody else out there in the world that's struggling emotionally and mentally. I've been asked in the past, AJ, about what is your recommendation to people right now that are struggling. Well, besides practicing the laugh out loud practice, don't suffer in silence. That's the worst thing in the world, is for somebody to suffer in silence. Seek help, whether it's professional help, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's a colleague. And especially for men, this is particularly holds true, is they suffer in silence because they're embarrassed. They feel that if they show a sign of weakness, they won't be thought of as a man anymore. And that's a myth. It's probably one of the worst myths that exist in the world today, is that you will be less of a man if you talk to somebody about your mental state. So my encouragement would be to any man listening right now, don't suffer in silence. Find somebody to talk to.
Absolutely. Don't suffer in silence. Find somebody to talk to. Jack, I want to understand about this veterans issue about, especially, is it a medical issue or is it a much more of a social issue? And what is the government doing about it?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, it seems to be a psychological issue. And there have been studies conducted here in the United States by a group, a support group of former veterans themselves. They're based in the state of Ohio here in the United States. And I apologize, the name of the group escapes me. But they did a study, and it turns out that most of 95% of those suffering PTSD today was a result of them experiencing a traumatic situation when they were a child. So PTSD is, I don't want to say genetic, but it's more generational. So if they suffered a tragic incident as a child, 95% of those people who have experienced that in their early childhood develop PTSD, especially after being in combat overseas. It's a paradox that is kind of hard for the layperson to understand. Heck, I'm not a professional psychologist or a mental health professional in any way, shape, or form, but I understand it because I've been through it myself, I guess is the best way to put it.
Right, right. But don't these things come out when the screening happens for the, for enlistment, for getting them into the, armed forces?
No, not necessarily. And it could be as simple as it happened at such a young age that it doesn't register. It doesn't come to the forefront of the individual's mind when they're going through the process, when they're going through the screening. Or it could be something that they buried and just didn't want to talk about and never wanted to acknowledge it, and let alone acknowledge it going through the screening process, because then that might thwart them from joining the U.S. military.
Right. So, what is the solution, Jack? Because the numbers are quite large, and it's not just the even we call them veterans, but there might be very young veterans. Means earlier I used to think there used to be very people who have spent 10, 15, 20 years in the services. Some maybe less, and some are very young. Then they try to find their way out into this, into as we call the civilian life.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, AJ. Some of them are very young. The numbers are staggering when you think about it. I mean, for instance, since 9/11 in the year 2001 up until the year 2021, so a 20-year period, there were over 30,000 active duty and veterans who committed suicide. I mean, it's 4 times as many as those who died in combat in Iraq and in Afghanistan. The number of veterans who took their lives in the year 2019 was almost 6,500. The To answer the latter part of your previous question is also that the U.S. government, through the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration, has stood up a crisis hotline for veterans that may be contemplating taking their lives. And in the first year that telephone line was up, there were over 250,000 people that called that hotline in a 12-month period. That's staggering. That's absolutely staggering. 10 sailors on the same aircraft carrier committed suicide last year. So what was that connective tissue for those 10 people to take their lives on that same ship? I know the Navy was doing an investigation, but I've yet to see the results of that investigation. I think that the answer is you need to seek help. You need to seek professional help if you're seriously considering taking your own life. There's so much stress. I think some of it has to do with technology. I think the internet. I think some of these social media sites are some of the factors that contribute to some of the mental struggles and emotional struggles that people, especially younger people, are going through. I know I saw it with my youngest daughter. She got on a site, started chatting back and forth with somebody. He turned out to be a con artist, and put her in a tailspin where she started cutting herself. We saw the scars, the knife marks on her legs and on her arms. And it was a result of this online relationship she was having with a boy. So I'm sure she is not the only one. I've read about several other teenagers. Teenage suicide, the numbers are astonishing right now. So many teens are committing suicide. I don't know about globally, but within the United States, that I don't understand it. The only thing I can equate it to, as I said, is the pressures that they're experiencing via social medias.
Indeed, indeed, and I think not only just the government, but even as a society, we have to be aware of all these things. Institutions have to be aware of more about their responsibilities. Uh, Families have to be aware more about it, and the youngsters especially have to be more aware and cautious. And even though they are very impressionable minds, they are brilliant minds, but it's their growing up period, and when they are growing up, there can be many con artists around us who are using hiding behind the shadows and playing their shadowy game. So we got to use our mind. But in terms of veterans, I want to understand from you, Jack, is there data which shows that bifurcation in terms of, is it the junior officers, junior uh, uh, peop people in service, or the officer class who are after a certain degree, say, captain, lieutenant, what is the bifurcation? Are senior officers also uh, uh, a part of this whole? Are there suicides among the senior officers? Maybe as are they as huge in numbers as the junior veterans?
From the statistics that I have been following, it is not it, it's not solely focused on one particular rank or class within the military. It seems to be across the board, for lack of a better term. So yes, seniors, uh, yes, junior enlisted. So it's not bifurcated to any one particular group. It seems to be widespread. For instance, one of the highest suicide rates of any specific military position is retired fighter pilots. These are guys and women that live on the edge, have to make a split-second decision, or it could mean their demise. And they have that adrenaline pumping through their veins so fast, so hard for so long in their various you know jobs in their careers, that when they retire, they have nothing to do anymore. That adrenaline's not there, so it's almost like somebody addicted to drugs. They're so reliant on that adrenaline uh, day in and day out, that when that adrenaline isn't pumping at Mach 5, uh, they don't know what to do with themselves. So that was a one-off kind of dynamic amongst retired officers, senior or junior.
Right. This is something very new to me. Means I've never heard about this, but this is something that it's quite high amongst the retired fighter pilots. So is there no way? It looks like that we need to slow down in our lives. Not only those people who are using the mobile phones or any other things that we are, even people who are into corporate jobs, we all need to slow down. Even the military people who need to, who know that one day they will have to retire, like everyone else does in every sphere of life. They need to train themselves to slow down. And we all look forward to a life where we can, be away from all the tensions of our, bread and butter, and can live a bit more peacefully. Why does it become so difficult when that actual time comes, Jack?
I think it's because it becomes a way of life. You're used to that stress. You know, the social media, as I mentioned before, is a great stressor. I think across the board, there is so much misinformation and disinformation that is spread through social media. I mean, you're probably well aware, AJ, that in the United States right now, we are at the pinnacle of our political election season, with the presidential election only a couple of weeks away, plus a lot of Senate and congressional elections and some local stuff going on. you're inundated day in and day out by the 24/7 news cycle with all the bad stuff that's going on in the world. My father-in-law, who passed away a couple of years ago, used to say, if you don't want to be depressed during the day, don't turn on the news. And he was right, because I will admit I'm a news junkie. It's part of my job to monitor the news 24/7. You know, watching it all day long in the office, and it's kind of depressing. It really is. You know, you hear nothing but the bad stuff. Once in a while, I would say out of 10 stories that are covered in an hour newscast, you hear one good story that makes you smile, makes you laugh, makes you feel good. But the rest of the news is all, you know, bad news, for lack of a better term. And I think that has an effect on people. I think it has a long-term effect on them. And then throw in the social media, boy, you know, it's a double threat to people's psyche.
Right, right, Jack. I understand it, and for that you need to, disentangle, detach yourself
Mhm.
from not the events but the news, because
Right.
it all depends on how one presents the same thing with, and that is where one needs to understand what is happening, not only in your local area but also the country or the world, but also has to ensure that you are understanding in the right perspective what has happened, not only just the politics of it. And that is where the distortion have happened. Be that as it may, you are doing something good. Tell us a bit about your book, Laugh Out Loud. You told about it, but I want to understand, who is this book for? And when a person is under such a difficult time, can this be a right place to get started? Or should they go for much more that sort of medical advice? And along with that, this thing can certainly be handy.
You know, as I mentioned, I wrote Laugh Out Loud as a coping mechanism for people who were struggling emotionally or mentally. The book is not just targeted to those folks. Everybody should read it, as far as I'm concerned, because it reminds people to take a few minutes to laugh out loud. It's medically and emotionally beneficial. Uh, the chemical reactions that happen in the body, the release of neuropeptides from laughing, are beneficial to help fight cancer, diabetes, heart disease. So it has medical as well as psychological benefits to, you know, just pick up and laugh at something, whether it's an old picture, an old movie, a comedian, that your favorite comedian. One of my all-time favorites was Robin Williams. God rest his soul. Uh, every time I saw him, he made me laugh until I cried. Uh, and that was a good thing. Laughing till you cry is not a bad idea. It's actually extremely beneficial. So, as I mentioned, the book is for anybody who wants to have a laugh. Now, I want to put a disclaimer in the book. It's not a book full of jokes. So it's not something you're going to open, you're going to get page after page of jokes. No, it's a 5-step daily process, a ritual, so to speak, that you can do any time of the day or night, and achieve some benefits for yourself as a result. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And not for nothing that somebody has said, laughter is the best medicine. So why not try this medicine with no side effects, only benefits, before you need to get to any other medicine? Maybe we will never need to go to that sort of a
yeah, and you
medicine.
don't even have to go to a doctor to read the book. it's it's
Absolutely,
it's
absolutely,
available,
Jack.
right? Yeah, you don't have to.
Absolutely,
Your insurance company's not going to get billed for reading the book. Yeah.
absolutely. So there's so much to learn from you about all these things, Jack, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to learn more about you, uh, about the book, and get help from wherever it is possible. So for all those people who would want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
To get in touch with me personally, I have a website. It is www.jackdalyauthor. So that's JACK D as in dog, ALY, author.com. And if people want to look for Laugh Out Loud, they can check it out on Amazon.com or any of the other online bookstores that they may frequent.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.